After over a year of ownership, we are finally working on the Edwardian. The engine and gearbox are all going to have to come out together. I can try and pick the Liberty up with the forklift and dangle it somewhere near position. Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm back in Cornwall, back in the workshop, and I'm actually pleased to be able to almost call it a workshop now. It's starting to take shape. This is not another video of me just moving things around the workshop. This is a good one. We're going to work on the Edwardian. I know that I have got lots of other projects on the go. I'm desperate to get going on the Mini Ranelagh. The new frame has been cast, it's done, but the next step of that process will be to drill the holes in the casting, which means I need the mega drill working, but I haven't got three-phase power here yet. I'm working on it. I'm trying my best to get power in as soon as I can, but for that reason alone, I can't actually progress with the half wheels anymore. The Porsche is sitting at the top of the workshop. It's safe, it's all secure. I've got all the parts for it on the racking. It's good, it's here with me. But the spot welder, actually any welder, uses far too much power than what I've got here. Check the Porsche off. I can't do that yet. The Caddy is working well. Thank goodness, that doesn't need any work doing to it. Which leaves me with the Edwardian. It's now here in the workshop, ready to go, sitting on its pedestal there, with the engine next to it. I've got plenty to do on the chassis. I need to get the engine and gearbox removed, the front arches removed, quite a lot of components I need to take off to make way for the Liberty engine. So in today's episode, we are finally, after over a year of ownership, actually working on the Edwardian. Yes! Even the chicken's happy about it. Last Sunday, I went up to the Bicester Scramble, and you know I love it up there. Right, if you've never been to Bicester Scramble, it's an old airfield that has been saved and restored and turned into the most incredible selection of car-based workshops, restoring and building parts for Bentleys. The Heritage Skills Academy are there. It's always a treat going up there and hanging out with those guys with their training academy. Austin Pedal Cars have got a big shop up there, and a few times a year they have an open day called the Scramble. It's always very busy, but I swear every time I go it gets bigger and bigger and bigger with the most insane cars. My favourite thing to do is to get there really early as possible. So you catch people arriving and people turning up in their cars, parking up, getting it in position, getting out their cloths and cleaning everything up, seeing people shining up their pride and joy. There was a lot of VWs. There was a lovely cabriolet, there was a bay window, a couple of split screens, Baja, like an off-road Beetle. I brought my aerial down, my 1949, the aerial 500 that I've been restoring on the channel. If you haven't seen those videos and you're interested, go back and have a look at those. That was standing outside the Heritage Skills Academy stand. People seemed quite pleased with it, which is nice. Always nice. Not only were VWs well represented, there was a 356 there. It was later, it was a B, I think, the same colour, fjord green as mine. And that's the first time I've seen a 356 in that colour since owning mine. I had a little chat with the owner, it was really nice. It was a cool car. This is what I love about coming up to Bicester Scramble, the mix of cars. One minute you could be looking at an early 1900s Edwardian race car with an aeroplane engine. The next minute there's, you know, a 90s Ferrari driving past you, cruising past. Then you walk around the corner and then there's a whole nother paddock of brand new GT3 RSs, Lamborghinis, and amazing modern cars, supercars. Whether it's a Mark I Golf, an old camper van, there's absolutely something there for everybody. So I highly recommend, if you can, get yourself to the next Bicester Scramble because it is a brilliant day out. Kingsbury Racing have a big workshop there and they specialise in the vintage Bentleys, making, restoring, building cars that are way out of my league. They are the nicest, most amazing Bentleys, and the facilities they've got there and the knowledge that the staff have, just absolutely awesome. It was quite a surprise to see Ivan Dutton from Shed Racing's Peugeot there, hanging out in the Kingsbury Racing workshop. It's a Edwardian aero-engine special. I had a really good conversation with Lewis, who raced the Peugeot at the members meeting previously, a few weeks ago, and came third, which is so impressive. So it was fascinating speaking to Lewis about the sort of setup and do's and don'ts of what I'm about to get involved with. Lewis, if you're watching, thank you. And if you've got a Bentley or interested in a Bentley, go and have a look at Kingsbury Racing, because they've got everything you'll need. Something that caught me completely off guard was one of the workshops there had piles and boxes of books outside. Typically, I'm not really one for reading, but I thought I'd have a little nosy, because I'm again becoming a bit obsessed with finding old references in old books like this of period race cars from the Edwardian sort of Grand Prix times, and I found gold. A few general books with a section in them about the Edwardian Grand Prix time, some really good photos in there, some pictures and lovely illustrations of cars of the time. I've already got so many ideas in my head, and having this pile of books and getting them for an absolute bargain, I will say. There's so many cool ideas, really interesting, different layouts and designs that I hadn't thought about. It's so exciting, and this is what I think looking forward to the most, building this car, designing it and building it and working out where the engine's going to go, how we're going to do the radiator and body style and the shape and the design of it. So I'm absolutely chuffed a bit to get this pile of books. I cannot wait to get stuck in and start building a car and actually have something that more resembles a car. Let's not waste any time. Let's get the spanners out and get this engine out the Edwardian. First thing I'm going to do is take off these front arches, mainly because they're definitely not going back on the car, and secondly, they are right in the way, because the engine and gearbox are actually one complete casting. The sort of sump for the engine carries on to the gearbox. It's all one thing. So the engine and gearbox are all going to have to come out together. So I need to make some space, gain a bit of access to figure out how this engine is fixed in place, because the fact that the engine and the gearbox are all in one means the gear selector is going to have to come out as well, the handbrake is going to have to come out, pretty much all of this in the middle, the whole lot is going to have to come out. But let's get the wheel arches out of the way first. That will include these little headlight brackets on the inside of the wing. These would have originally held headlights. It'd be quite nice to put these back on eventually. If I do any street driving at night and I need some headlights, then I could use these original brackets and get some lovely big old Edwardian lamps to put on there. All of these little bits will be going into a little pile that I'll be keeping and no doubt dipping back into when I need them later on. All right, let's get these wheel arches out of the way. It's quite interesting to look and see how it's like simple mechanisms but done in a really clean, considered way. This rear brake, the handbrake, which will be sort of outside the car, that actually works the rear brakes, the shoes in the rear brakes. They're all controlled with rods. And look, it's such a nice, straightforward, simple mechanism. The handbrake lever rotates this bar which goes through into the gearbox, and then that has a little lever coming down from it, which has a rod going to the back. That splits into two with this sort of this bar running across that just basically links both together. That has two more shorter rods which go to levers which go directly in and are joined on to the pivot inside the rear drum, which is like an offset kind of cam essentially, that as that rod and that lever pivots and rotates, it pushes the drums out. Really simple, but I guess effective. How effective, we'll find out, but certainly quite basic. Sadly, I am going to have to disconnect this because the mechanism is part of the gearbox, which is also then part of the engine. The handbrake lever and the gear selector all come off with the gearbox all in one, so it's going to all have to come off. These two little bolts that have just come out of the brake and gear lever bracket holding it onto the chassis, they've got this lovely little key, and the actual cast part, the actual bracket for this handbrake lever has got a tiny little sort of broached out keyway almost in it. That's so cool. Little details like this are what I keep finding. Not all of the nuts and bolts, because this thing has been taken apart before. When I'm rebuilding this, I need to give every single fastening as much thought and attention to detail as the original makers did, because that's what makes these Edwardians so special. The next crazy little mechanism that I'm going to be removing is this transmission brake. I think this is similar to series Land Rovers. Just behind the gearbox, there's actually a brake drum in line before the rear axle, which is essentially a brake. That may change, but so far in my head, I'm not going to use this on the race car. I think I'm better off having all the braking in the rear drums instead of trying to do it in line as a sort of transmission brake like this. Saying that, Pretty much everything I've got here looks like it's complete, which is why I'm doing this, taking all of this out, getting the Liberty bits and the new pieces in, balanced in place, just to eye up and see how much space I have, or don't have, I think is going to be the case. This brake mechanism actually just had one bracket that was fixed to a sort of cross member, which I've taken off. The actual brake shoes can stay in place, and there's every chance that's asbestos, you know it's going to be, so I'll leave those. Another thing I need to remove is the pedal assembly, because again they're bolted to this big casting that runs underneath the whole engine and gearbox, and it's got a fixing there for the pedal assembly, so pedals are going to have to go. Okay, pedals removed, success. The next thing I'm going to get out of the way is the steering column, and most importantly the steering box. It obviously needs to go back on, but it's going to have to move because that is going to be right in the way. I can tell already the Liberty engine is way too wide and way too long to even entertain having the steering box staying where it is. So some modifications are going to have to happen there. We'll talk about that more later. It took some heat to get that joint off, but it's removed. We're all good, no damage. Now, I think there's 4 bolts holding the steering box to the bracket on the chassis, and then the whole unit, the steering box with the column and the steering wheel, should all come off in one, hopefully. Back here at the end of the gearbox there is a nice little cast iron bracket for the exhaust tube that runs to the back. We are not going to need this bracket because our exhaust is definitely not going to be running underneath the car in this tiny little 2-inch piece of tube. It's going to be a lot bigger than that. All right, there we go. Nice piece of cast iron that's gone to the foundry, been cast, been machined, drilled out, just for an exhaust bracket. Who knows, that may end up being a steering column support or something else. I have got everything removed that I think I need to remove to be able to get this engine out. There were 2 giant bolts holding it on to some brackets on the front. The engine is literally wobbling loose now, so it's ready, I think, to fire up the forklift. Try and get the forks as close as I can above it, get some straps, and it's time for some more precarious forklifting. The one thing that I have no clue how to remove is the drive shaft. Drive shaft or prop shaft, I think that depends where you are or who you are, but hey, I have no idea how that is attached onto the end of the gearbox. Whether it's just a spline fit and it pulls out, so once I lift the engine and gearbox, it's just going to slide out. At either end, I can't see any obvious way of unbolting it or loosening anything. So I think all I can do is try and take the weight of the engine and gearbox, see if I can shift it up and forwards and hope that the drive shaft falls out, or it will become quite obvious if that is what's holding it. I just can't get the forks anywhere near where I need to because the walkways either side of the workshop are just too narrow to be able to spin the forklift on the spot. So I can only come at it from an angle and they're nowhere near. I have still got my mega crane, which I used to use to move the ranelers around. I may have to resort to using that. I think that might be a better option. If I get that out, pump it back up, get it on this little platform, that should reach over, but it's going to be an absolute pain to move. But at least I can get the engine out with it. Big engine crane is up onto the pedestal, in position. I've completely guessed the centre of gravity with this engine and gearbox. I'm assuming the engine is a lot heavier than the gearbox, so I've shifted it this way. And there's a nice little sort of pocket in between the castings for the sump, essentially, that I can slip it through. How I get it out is another question, but yeah, let's see if it's attached to that drive shaft and what on earth is happening. Fingers crossed this goes well. It really needs to. Yes, it's splined and it slides out, the drive shaft. That means I can now lift the engine a bit more, slide it, it's gonna kind of go whoop like that, the gearbox is gonna drop, it's gonna slide out the back, up and away. The engine and gearbox are out. Yes, I got the centre of gravity completely wrong, and I'm at quite a jaunty angle, but that's fine. It's not going anywhere. I've got the legs of the crane underneath the side, so I can't roll the chassis out because it will hit the legs of the crane. I can't move the crane because the floor in here is so uneven and wonky. I should have thought about this before. I think I'm gonna get a bar and try and roll the crane back as far as I can. I just need to get the engine clear of the chassis so I can drop it down to the floor, onto a pallet or something like that, but it's all I've got. It's the only solution I can think of. Getting that engine out was an absolute nightmare, and I am not doing the same thing with the Liberty. The Liberty is a lot heavier than that engine and a lot more precious. Now the engine is out and it's just a rolling chassis, it's a bit more manageable. I'm going to roll it off the plinth, put it at the bottom down here where the forklift used to live, because that is relatively flat. I can use the forklift basically to get around because it will be on the flat ground. I say flat, nothing's flat in here, but relatively level. I can try and pick the Liberty up with the forklift and dangle it somewhere near position. I've been staring at it next to it for so long. This is where it all starts to become more of a reality. You'll be so proud of me. I have just spent 50 quid on the right tool for the job. 2 4-meter long, 2-ton each straps, which are long enough to go all the way underneath, around and up the Liberty engine, so I can pick it up relatively safely with the forklift, and then zap off the screws to leave the pallet behind, and then I should be left with a Liberty dangling on some straps. I think I may have slightly misunderstood how this pallet was put together. I assumed those screws going through that I took out would separate the piece of wood that I've put the strap through, but no, apparently not. It's still taking the pallet with it. Bear with me. Can't get in enough with the forklift, so I'm going to reverse, put it on some axle stands or some blocks, get the forklift out of the way and get the big crane, the engine crane, in. That's the answer. This is taking a long time. This has been an epic amount of work, and everything's heavy and everything is so fragile and expensive and rare. The Liberty V12 is in the Roche Schneider chassis. Well, it's balanced in the hull, it's not bolted down. This is the first time ever that I have actually put that engine in between the chassis. I have stared at the engine so much. I've been taking measurements, I've been looking at Babs and other cars with V12s and Liberties, been looking at so many other Edwardians and trying to think about how they've done things and what's going to work for me. Julian and Duncan and a few other people that I spoke to did warn me. They said you can't do anything until you've got the chassis where you want it, and then put the engine in, see where the engine sits. Basically everything revolves around the engine. The engine is the restriction because it's so big. The sump is very low, so I can't actually have it that much lower than where it is now. That dictates where the chassis is going to sit, which dictates where the rear end is. Everything really revolves around this engine. So this is only very rough at the moment. The engine I've got is a Garwood marine conversion, which makes it 450 or 500 brake horsepower, which is way too much. Julian's Sunbeam is less than 200 horsepower. Mark Walker's Darracq is 200 horsepower. You could have 1,000 horsepower, but you're still only allowed these tiny little narrow tyres, which are just not going to keep any traction. You can see there is literally not enough space from the back of the engine. I need to allow for a huge flywheel, a clutch, the gearbox, some couplings and fittings, the drive shaft, and then the rear end. And there is just physically not enough space between the engine where it is now, which is already a bit too far forwards than I would like, and the rear end, which can't move. I'm going to be racing this around a racetrack, so I need a short, light, nimble car to get around corners. The guy who I got the Liberty engine from, Guy Black, had a Curtis sitting on the shelf, a V8, lightweight V8, much smaller, and would fit in perfectly. I saw 4 or 5 of them, I think, at members meeting, and I just want to do something different. And I didn't see a single Liberty, and I think I'm starting to realise why. They are massive, just physically very long, big engines. They only made, I think, 2 or 3 prototype V8s, so hardly any. But what about if I cut this engine in half? What if I make a V6? The Garwood marine intakes are, I've got 2 of them and they're in banks of 3, so I could flip one of those and put it on the other side and have 1 carb each side, feeding them as they are, but 1 on either side. The distributor, the ignition system, is a twin spark, so each distributor has 6 lobes and 2 sets of plugs. So I could use the same ignition, the same cams, the same distributors, but just pick out the 6 cylinders that I'm left with, and there'll just be some gaps. Essentially cut the middle out of the engine. Leave the front of the engine with the cam timing and the distributors and the drive for the cam timing going up. Leave all of that. The front where the propeller would come out, which I'm now using as the back, that has the big main bearing in there in the end. So I would use that end for support, use the front end with the cam timing, and weld them together. Cut the middle 4 cylinders out and just weld them back together. Put the intakes around there, choose the leads I want, make an exhaust. What do you think? I know a lot of you are very clever and a lot more experienced than me in this kind of thing. So what do you think? Leave everything the same, just have an uneven firing V6, 200 horsepower, half the weight. It will fit in perfectly. It'll be the only one in the world. Let me know. Any engine builders, anyone out there with some knowledge on uneven firing engines or V6s, or how to weld cast aluminium cases back together, any help would be very much appreciated. I would love to know your thoughts. This is going to be an epic job, a huge job, but I'm ready. I'm ready to get stuck straight into it. At the moment, the chassis is sitting way too high. The chassis to the carb clearance is not enough, and the engine needs to sit lower for the drive line, which means I need to lower the chassis down. So I think I need to move some suspension points around, which I'll probably do hopefully in next week's video, but let me know what you think. I think it's exciting. The Liberty V6 for the Ranelagh rocket. Make sure you've subscribed so you get a notification when the next video comes out. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithms. Let me know what you think about the V6. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Take care.